Okay, sure. We'll not.
Wait, hit OK.
Yeah, just hit OK.
Hit the record button.
What the fuck is
we'll
OK?
sync up. Hit the record button, Card.
I'm hitting the record.
Why are you
I've hit
down?
the fuck.
I need you. No, don't shut
No,
down.
I've been recording, man.
I'm
What's
sorry.
the what is OK though? Like what's
It stands for
What?
all correct. You know, OLLKORRECT. All correct.
what?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I have no idea.
OK originally actually started as a abbreviation for all correct.
Okay.
I believe it came from an abbreviation from all is clear, if anything.
No, all correct. OLLKORRECT. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. Anyways, what were you guys talking about? Capitalism sucks?
Oh my god.
We're-
Second stage ignition.
We're talking about, so welcome for all you for that great cold open of.
Wait, we're already in it?
Yeah, we're already in. Let's go. This is the next
We should do
Chapo.
the clap.
It's the next Chapo. No, we're not even doing the clap. We're just next Chapo. Let's go.
Oh,
You guys
shit,
are gonna
okay.
fuck up my fucking editing.
Okay,
so
let's do the
much.
clap, alright? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There we go. All right, that'll actually help my editing a lot. But yeah, so what we were doing was we were talking about. Zuli asked, what would be a thing where you reject capitalism but you don't want socialism? That literally what that generally is like that's kind of how fascism started, where it was like the third way ideology, quote unquote.
But I mean, like, making no positive prescriptions or anything about like that. Like, not third way, not socialism, not capitalism.
Isn't it just agorism?
not-
I guess. I mean, it's really a non-ideology because it's like, I don't like capitalism, but I also don't think socialism is the way. But
Okay, but
well,
we
the-
have words for other non-ideologies, like anarchism is a non-ideology.
I think that ideology would
That's-
just be
anarchism is
know.
not non-ideology. At least in
That-
like
that's-
the anarchist tradition. If you're talking about non-ideology in the sense that
very
anarchism,
paradisey, you know?
well,
Like, okay, so you can have ideological tenets within anarchism. Anarchism itself is not necessarily ideological,
yes,
but it often does become.
yes,
I'm just asking, like, what would the word be for that applied to just economics, not to politics?
and
to
fucking
the extent that that's
it'd probably be
even
centrism
possible.
or some shit.
Is it centrism or centerism?
Probably centrism.
Ew.
I don't see centrism as being a particularly good influence anywhere, anytime. Bong rip.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is like, if you're not for socialism, but you're not for capitalism, and you're not like in any of the sense in an in between state of like, you know, doing something like Keynesian, then you just really don't care about economics because there's like no other way on that sliding scale.
Well, but hold on. But again, there is a mercantilism. Like, you could just say, like, well, I want people to own things, and I like the fact that profit exists, but I don't want, like...
Well, that's like literally like being a monarchist in the
what the
21st
hell?
century.
Yeah.
It's just like stupid. It's like, okay, you're for mercantile. You're like, that's like saying I'm for feudalism, and it's like, okay, then you're just dumb.
Yeah.
Oh shit, the third way still exists. What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, third way is like fascism.
Founded in 2013, Third Path is a minor far-right neo-Nazi political party in Germany. founded in September 28th, 2013 by former MPD officials. Anyway.
All right, so let's get back on topic. So we're discussing Kropotkin chapters 5, 6, and 7, because 7's super fucking short. And this is where we get to the meat and the potatoes of it, or the bread of the book, as you might say.
How the fuck do we revolt, is basically what this is.
Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting, because he doesn't talk about revolts early on, but now he really goes into the nitty-gritty of what you should do. You know, how do the revolution need to stay stable? And I think he hits on a lot of things that other writers really haven't when it comes to, like, revolution, where it's what you need to do in order to keep it stable, and especially talking about his central focus here is food and housing and things of that nature. And that's really important because a lot of times people, like, a lot of armchair generals and, like, people who like to speculate about a second civil war in America really love to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to revolt and then we'll take over the government by shooting them a lot. But they don't tend to...
And then what?
Yeah, exactly. They don't tend to look at war as a fight over... as a mainly a resourceful thing. Like, any military general will tell you that if you don't look at... if you just focus on the battlefield and don't focus on your line of supplies, you will lose every single fucking time.
An army fights on its stomach.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the big thing is just like, that's the thing that I think scares most people out of any kind of revolution. It's not the idea that Big Brother's gonna put them down for it, but just that they're going to starve in the process of it.
Well, that was the biggest thing, is that because most of the revolutions that we have, like, you have things like with war communism, where you have a suspension of kind of how resources are allocated, and I think Kropotkin really, before war communism even became a thing during the Russian Civil War, really actually had a really good criticism of it and kind of talked about it in his chapter on bread, which was very, very interesting.
Well, bread, you mean food? Just food in general. I mean, yeah, it makes sense that it's just that we're talking about the conquest of bread, but bread, it is bread that the revolution needs, right?
Yeah, that's kind of why it's
the bread book.
Yeah, because it makes a lot of mention about how the fuck are these guys going to get fed, and he refers specifically to bread.
And he actually talks a lot, like, even before this chapter, he talks a lot specifically about the Paris Commune and why the third Paris Revolution ended up failing, because as soon as they revolted and they gained their own thing, everybody was like, okay, so how do we eat now? Because all the people who owned the grain and made the grain were just like, well, your money's no good to us, because what are we going to exchange it for? You're literally the only people that utilize your currency, so now we're not going to sell you our bread. We're not going to sell you our wheat, so I guess you're going to starve because you can't grow any food in the middle of Paris.
Yeah, it was that sort of thing where I think that
it had to be a full communist revolution or nothing at all. It is a very all or nothing thing.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest things is really this book at its core is a critique of that third Paris Revolution. It is really looking into why it failed and what can be done to make sure that other things do not fail. So I think that's a very interesting thing to know, and it also kind of gets back to it kind of gets back to the idea of the sort of the context of the book. For one, the major reason why he talks about bread is there was, at least in Paris, bread was a major force of sustenance, and it has been for a long, long time. And
it's got literally half of what your body needs for the entire day.
Well, yeah.
The other half you can just get some meat, and suddenly you're good.
But most of the French revolutions happened because the bourgeoisie was hoarding grain, and the people went through a period of famine. So, of course, then you have a revolution that happens. You have the first French Revolution, where they stormed what they storm to find the grain? It wasn't the Bastille that they stormed to find and found all the grain.
The hog?
I believe so. So yeah, they
need to brush up a little bit on my history, if only to just kind of feel more comfortable, looking in that period and kind of
no, the hog is
in that framework.
Not.
Oh, you're thinking about the Hague. No,
Yeah.
I meant it was a monastery of some sort in central Paris where the bourgeoisie was like King Leo or King Louis was hosting a lot of grain.
Oh yeah, yeah. They talked about. He specifically does say. He talks about the first revolution, saying that the Girondists were the ones starving the workmen. So the Girondists are starving us was the cry from the workmen and the workmen's quarters in 1793. Then he goes on to say in 1871 the commune perished for lack of combatants. Had taken measures for the separation of church and state, but neglected at last until too late to take measures for providing the people with bread. Bread. It is bread that the revolution needs. And like, I think specifically in this one, he's not especially in previous chapters, he's talking about, it's all well and good to be sitting down and be like, yeah, let's kick all of the bad people out, but if you don't have a structure in place after the revolution happens to specifically feed and provide work for the people, and we're not talking like just we're not talking just. We're not talking specifically just giving people a wage, because he actually talks about how later how the wage system is actually bad, but specifically to give people something to do and to feed them at the same time.
And not only that, but like in these 3 chapters, he also talks about housing and clothing and sort of one
you
of
don't want that to grind to a halt either.
Mm-hmm. And it's very poignant his criticisms of how revolutions happen and how they are, shaped by the material conditions. In a sense, his history of revolution the Second French Revolution and his solutions for it are materialist. They're the idea of, well, the people need food, so what we need to do is ensure that everyone has food within our system. That needs to be first and foremost. So, like, if you have a revolution that states that you are working for the working class people, you need to back that up. And also, you can't just have an urban revolution; it needs to also be rural.
Mm-hmm.
Another terrifying thing about that is, like, if you don't take care of the food issue, capitalism can just resume amidst a communist revolution.
Yeah.
Well,
like, someone is going to own something that they can exploit, and they're going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah,
this is the go ahead.
Yeah, especially like
if someone told me, that's how it's gonna do.
Yeah, so like that goes back into the whole wage system. Like, if we don't have a means to provide people with something to do, like especially in the face of paying other people to get them to feed them, like we see that that the capitalists tend to just, well, you guys need food, so we got work that we want you to do, so we're just going to set up shop here in the middle of this communist commune, and it's a socialist commune, and you work for us. Yeah, here's some money. Go buy some bread.
Yeah, and the solution isn't to then suppress the capitalists, because then you get into authoritarian communism, which when it's authoritarian, it doesn't last because it's really fear-based.
Well, it's because you're taking the bourgeoisie element of power and you're putting it into you're co-opting bourgeoisie power rather than actually fighting against it.
Yeah, and he even specifically says this: collectivism, as we know, does not abolish the wage system. It only substitutes the state, some form of representative government, national or local, for the individual employer of labor. Like, you're literally just swapping out one bad thing for the other.
Markets are fine also under capitalism. The trick, though, to prevent... markets are found under communism. They happen under any system. The trick, though, is instead to deter capitalism from happening, make sure people are fed quickly.
Well, that's literally what he's talking about here, and he goes into this in an earlier chapter where people are he addresses the argument of, well, if you have a socialist commune, why don't I just come in with a ton of money and then just pay everyone because everyone's poor? But if you have, his whole idea is getting rid of the need for money. If people are sustained, like if you give people a house, food, some means of being productive, they will have almost no need for more money. Like luxury goods and the idea of everyone wants the best of the best and everyone wants, all these luxury things is generally a really, it's a reactionary view of the world because it kind of takes the idea of,
I mean, it's a little real, but you do have to be in a position where the best of something is a possibility for you.
Well, no. The reason why I would make the argument that no, it's not real is that generally people on like Wall Street and stuff, if you look at reports and things of that nature, what ends up happening is that you find there's a lot of sociopaths there. So these people are not normal in the sense that they want, altruism and, want what's best for the family. They want what's best
Fair
for
enough.
themselves, and they will do whatever they can to, get that.
I forgot that capitalism rewards sociopathic behavior.
Well, it's not even necessarily rewarding sociopathic behavior, but more of antisocial behavior, because capitalism seems to, and like I actually found this dichotomy really weird, but like it seems to reward the individualistic selfishness, but at the same time, it kind of also rewards the collective action at the labor level. I actually got into a discussion with one of my friends about this, and I was basically saying that under capitalism, it rewards the capitalist to be selfish and try to make more profit, but at the same time, it also basically rewards or tries to force upon the laborer this collectivist attitude. Oh, well, you can't take off because, your fellow workers need you here, right? It almost co-opts this idea.
But it co-opts it, but it does it so in a coercive manner. It's not.
Well, it's
doing
hostage taking.
Yeah,
really.
it does it in a manner which is to say that it is, it's coercive. It's simply.
It's kind of like, telling Shinji to get in the robot, or we'll make what's her fucking name? You know the scene I'm talking about.
No.
Next.
I do
What?
not know.
Oh my god, you haven't seen Evangelion?
No.
Oh, no, I haven't either.
Oh no. Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm actually gonna have to explain this.
No, don't.
No, I
Just
Don't worry.
okay,
Reese
good.
Pie.
We're an anime podcast.
God. No. Next.
We answer that there are no two ways of it. There's only one way in which communism can be established equitably. Only one way which satisfies our instincts of justice and is at the same time practical, namely the system already adopted by the agrarian communes of Europe. And I actually wanted to make this point. In his revolution, he's not talking about just taking the cities. He's talking about dismantling the entire system and starting back from agrarian societies. And that is the only way to fully establish what he calls anarchist communism.
Okay, I can kind of see it, but it's a little bit crazy.
Well, I mean, it is a radical idea in that sense, but like all these problems we have are radical problems. You're not gonna fully address them unless you dismantle the system. I would agree with Kropotkin on this, that simply just taking the means of bourgeois power and then trying to use that to take the system. If you're going to take the means of bourgeois power, you have to use the state to destroy the state. You have to take the means.
Okay,
and then,
Thanos.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. I mean, it's a meme, but that's what it is.
And this is actually one of the biggest. Issues that I have with Marx is that he always talks about how communism needs to technically move through capitalism, because in his idea, when Marx was writing, he was saying that, oh hey, we have this system that ultimately needs to be taken over, because he's writing this in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. He's like, okay, these industrial complexes need to be taken over and given to the proletariat. But if we already have an agrarian society like in Russia, in the Russian Revolution, why are we going to push through in the Industrial Revolution, basically reset capitalism, and then be like, oh, well, we're just going to get communism and capitalism? It doesn't make logical sense, because as soon as the capitalists have power, they're going to do everything in their power to keep it.
Well, that's because Marx has a teleological bent to what he's talking about. It's a very linear view of history and the fact that this is how history goes. But, as someone who studies history, that's one of the biggest problems that we have is this view of a linear view of history. And that's definitely, I think that's a brilliant point to bring up about Marx and sort of talk about... it's almost like Trotsky's idea of the permanent revolution, where Trotsky was talking about in the Russian Revolution, basically trying to go from agrarian straight to communism in that sense. And so he's kind of talking about that. And so for as much as all leftists hate Trotskyists, he was right about that. Like, history is not linear progression of ideas and societies. History is a very fluid thing, and you can go for anywhere from being in the fucking Stone Age all the way up to, full gay space luxury communism in any amount of steps. It just depends on what you do.
Fully automated luxury gay space communism.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. So I would argue against. I'd say that, teleological views of history and, sort of, it's a very even like a liberal view, because you see this especially in neoliberals, like with Fukuyama and The End of History. The title explains itself. It's the idea that we have reached the end, we have reached the apex, history was all leading up towards this, when the reality is that any given moment there are an infinite number of possible future histories.
You said possible.
Yeah, fine. Possible future histories.
Well, arguably, we're actually at a point where there's only four futures, to reference the Jacobin article, four futures.
Well, the four most likely, literally, we could say, like, we could, I don't know, maybe if we're in the Watchmen universe, Ozymandias pulls off a huge attack on New York, and there's another history. There are four histories that we can kind of see, but my point is also all four of those can play out in a billion different ways, because we don't have a view of, like, literally every single alternate or possible universe. We cannot simply state that this is the way it has to happen. We can recognize historical trends and then try to use those to make policy, but we cannot predict the future. And I believe that only saying, yes, this is how it has to be, is wrong.
Well, and it's almost like Marx tries to create a conclusion and find evidence to support that conclusion instead of looking at the evidence and then finding a conclusion. Because he kind of comes from Hegel with this dialectic and goes, well, dialectical materialism is what drives history, the struggle between the two classes. And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but even you mentioned the fact that there's more than just two classes, which means any of those classes could ultimately influence the future. They could ultimately change it to whatever makes their class more powerful.
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate reason why I think, like, part of me is interested.
I mean, that's also just not anarchism. That's straight up monarchy. That's just having a benevolent king, which is all well and fine, but how do you make sure you keep it,
Well, you just gotta be Hobbes,
Personally, I like Calvin and Hobbes.
Well, no, like the Leviathan.
Who doesn't?
Oh, I know, I'm joking.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
Well, for the listeners who don't really get our references, because we do kind of have a lot of obscure philosophical references here. Hobbes basically wrote the book called Leviathan, which was basically, hey, we need the monarchy because without the monarchy, we would plunge into nothing but chaos and disorder. Yeah. His basic premise was that without some overarching force that we sacrifice our rights to, like some elder god, we would ultimately just always be killing each other. And this actually even ties back into the book where Kropotkin was talking about how all these tables and details will not serve to convince those of the middle class, who regard the people as a mob of savages ready to fall upon and devour each other as soon as the government ceases to direct affairs. And he almost argues directly against the Leviathan here, saying, no, we don't actually need this system of government, the system of power, to keep people at bay from stop stealing and stop killing from each other. We just need to start from a fair and a just and equitable system in an agrarian society. Because as soon as we start transgressing past the agrarian society, then we start seeing the hoarding of wealth. We start seeing the specialization of skills to a point where people can no longer function independently.
Well, it's a contempt of the working class. Like, I was listening to the latest episode of the Useful Idiots podcast, where they were talking about what ends up happening when, a lot of the neoliberals, especially under Obama, sort of, one of the major reasons why Trump rose to power was because people saw in Trump this sort of disgraced figure that everyone made fun of, much like Obama did with, and the neoliberals in general did with, like, the working class, and kind of seeing them as, like, either something to be mocked or as something of a social experiment to be studied and poked and prodded and dissected, rather than as kindred or as brotherhood, and taking those lines and really separating them out. Which, when you have someone like Trump who then starts speaking to the issues of the working class, people will start to latch on to that. And so it is...
Even when he's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter what he actually does. It's the idea of Trump that makes him powerful.
It's kind of a weird idea.
Yeah, and it's essentially like... Even going back to, it's like the idea of, like, the myth of the myth of the welfare queen, and the idea of, well, if everything's free in society, there are going to be people who just mooch, and it has a really, dour and depressing take on just the human condition, because it assumes that, like, every single time that you're not monitored, you're plotting to kill everyone. Or, like, even going even further into depravity, like the neoliberal condition of, well, everyone only works in their economic best interest, so therefore everyone is always cold and calculating and sitting here, like, doing calculations in their head about stocks and wondering, well, if I kill this person, will that be economically viable for me? And that's just not how people work.
But that's the normalization of the Hobbesian myth, right?
I think that's what they think they would do under these conditions. So that's they're literally just projecting themselves onto this shit.
Well, not even that, but, like, the Hobbesian myth is basically saying straight up that, hey, nature is ultimately chaotic, and if we don't have a bigger body than the person trying to take our stuff, the person's going to take our stuff. That's just how it is. Without a government, without a state, without anything, we're just all going to be killing each other for the stuff that we each have instead of working in cooperation. And I think
that sounds like the type of thing someone who would do exactly that would say.
What is this, American Psycho?
Literally,
I don't know. I've never seen it.
It's literally the idea that everyone is secretly an American Psycho, whereas American Psycho was more or less talking about how the socially depraved and sort of the crazy people under capitalism get to climb to the top. That is what it fundamentally misses what American Psycho was even about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think kind of moving on to
Still haven't seen it.
It's a good movie. Watch the scene of Huey Lewis in the news. And,
that's great. He just starts.
The one where
He just starts talking about Huey Lewis in the news like it's nothing, and he's just murdering the dude with a fucking axe.
He's like, their sports album was pretty good. And he's putting on a fucking raincoat and laying down. His friend's too drunk to care, and he's putting down the newspaper. It's so good. It is so good. But kind of moving on to housing. And this is chapter 6, and he talks a little bit about housing and makes some interesting things where it's like almost to make an Obama meme out of it. He's like, if you well, I guess he does this more in clothing, but he's like, if you like your coat, you can keep it.
Yeah, and that even goes back. That even goes back to expropriation when he's talking about we're gonna let people keep what they have.
Keep it though.
What?
Is he inviting us to not keep it though?
Well, because that's his entire argument about the revolution is that people perceive as a socialist revolution as, we're going to take everything and put it into a big pile and people take what they need. No.
It's literally the dad grilling meme where
it's,
yeah.
But even so, like, he even leads into this in food, basically saying that... Yeah, we must offer to the peasant in exchange for his toil not worthless paper money, but manufacture articles for which he stands in immediate need. and even talks about how who then can appropriate to himself the tiniest plot of ground or the meanest building in such a city without committing a flagrant injustice. He's not saying, hey, we're going to take everything, put it into a pile, and just take what you need. He's like, you can keep what you want. Money's not going to be an issue because there's going to be no government to back it. If you want to use money, go ahead, but nobody's going to respect that. But what we need to do is we just need to make everything from this point forward more equitable.
Well, that's the thing. I think that he really hits the nail on the head where he's talking about if you want to really get rid of capitalism, you need to get rid of the incentives for capitalism, and you need to get rid of the reasons
In order
why
to do
people
that,
like. Yeah.
you need to feed your people.
Well, exactly. If everyone's well fed and everyone's well done, if everyone's well fed, well clothed, and housed, then what is there for a reason for anyone being like, hey, you want $10 for this fucking piece of bread? And some people will be like, sure, that looks like a nice piece of bread.
Well, he actually even takes from Proudhon a little bit in the beginning of this, basically talking about the rights of property. How the house is not built by its owner. It was erected, decorated, and furnished by Negro workers in the timber yard, the brick field, and the workshop, toiling for dear life at minimum wage. And he's taking this idea of property rights and saying, well, just because you own a thing doesn't necessarily mean that it's yours, at least in terms of housing and dwellings.
Yeah, I'm not sure how good I feel about that one on the kind of EA.
Well, no, because
I think Kropotkin's view might change in light of recent bullshit.
Yes, Kropotkin is actually going to become a gamer, and he's going to put on the Joker makeup and say EA bad.
Yeah, but like he's taking this.
He's gonna see.
He takes this to the next level and basically says we're not talking about people who are living there and people who are making their livelihood in these houses. We're talking about people that are claiming, hey, we own this house, pay us or we're going to evict you. He must understand that the abolition of rent is a recognized principle. Period. Like, he says more, but, like, we're talking about... He's saying, we're getting rid of all of the things that people don't need. You can keep your luxury coats, but what are you going to need it for when there's no social incentive? You can keep your toil, but what are you going to do with all that extra food? You can keep your houses that you live in, but we're basically going to tell the landlords, we're going to tell these capitalists that are basically claiming ownership of things they don't even touch, just because they paid somebody for it.
Suggesting like that, I don't know. It sounded to me like he's suggesting that, you know, fashion would stay static for the rest of the time. I'll tell you, that's not fucking gonna happen.
That's the exact opposite of what he's saying. He's saying, like, look, fashion doesn't matter. People just want to have clothes. It doesn't matter if you have a fancy coat or whatnot, because it's not. I think he literally says that it's not going to stay the same.
Yeah.
Well, that's something more for when we talk about clothing. But, like, at this point,
which is coming up here in a second.
Yeah, like, at this point, he's literally going more into expropriation and how it's not the stuff that we're after. We're not trying to steal your coats. We're not trying to steal your gaming stations. We're not trying to steal your massive 110-inch TVs. We just want to make sure that people are taken care of. That's it. We want to make everything equitable. And by that, he is literally saying, we want to make sure people are fed, housed, and clothed.
Well, I just find it interesting where, I think I said this earlier when you weren't here, Gekka, but I was making really all the talk about landlords and stuff was really reminding me of Mao and sort of what he was talking about with landlords, and I think...
Weird lag.
He didn't kill landlords, he just killed sparrows. They were pests, come on.
Well, yeah, but you know, the sparrows had it coming.
I'm not getting the reference here.
So Mao actually implemented, at the behest of rural communities, the extermination of 4 different types of pests, and one of them was considered one of the pests was sparrows, and he literally just murdered a whole bunch of birds.
And it really fucked up the ecology of the region.
What the fuck?
Oh yeah, no, Mao made some really, really bad decisions, and honestly,
that's not just bad. That's not just bad. That's weird.
But we're talking like he was trying, like, the very specific reasoning behind it was the farmers and the rural communities had these 4 pests. I think it was mice. Hold on, let me actually look this up. It was mice, sparrows, malpests. The four
One of them
pests
was
were
landlords.
right.
Hey.
Yeah.
It was mosquitoes.
Yeah.
It was sparrows.
I live
No,
in
rats.
Minnesota.
Yeah,
Mosquitoes
rats,
are the worst.
flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows were the four pests that he killed back in the 1950s.
Well, because the sparrows would actually, I think we were talking about this in one of my French Revolution classes. Was one of the major reasons for the French Revolution was that pigeons were illegal to kill in France, but pigeons were also eating all of the crops and stuff. So yeah, exactly. It's in that same vein. You can almost see a through line through to the Cultural Revolution from the French Revolution.
And given the
yeah.
circumstances, like, it makes sense why he chose to kill those four pests, because they were considered, the bringers of pestilence and famine. But at the same time, mostly because we didn't have the understanding of ecology and biology that we do now, it fucked up the entire ecosystem entirely.
Yeah. Just damn.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit.
Yeah, the Cultural Revolution is a fucking weird one, but it's very interesting. I think I don't know a whole lot of Maoists, but I might not want to bring one on to talk about.
Oh, we should bring Jazzy.
Look, I might turn out to be a Maoist someday, so, cross your
Yeah.
fingers, I guess.
But also, Gecko, what we were talking about earlier was kind of. Well, we'll talk about this after the pod. I was just talking about plans with the future and whatnot. You weren't here for, but so yeah, he talks about. I think one of the biggest things that I found was very prophetic with his chapter on housing was, especially nowadays, we're seeing the same thing where there's vacant apartments, but there's rampant homelessness. And the same thing was happening in Paris. So it's very clear that, the problem is not people who people just don't have enough money for a house. And I believe housing should be a human right. I believe that people should have all their basic necessities met, because that's when innovation happens. When you don't have to worry about when you take risks and stuff like that, the current capitalist system, you have to worry about, well, if I take this risk and I fuck up, I am going to die on the street in the fucking gutter.
Yeah, no.
Unless I'm a billionaire.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is people get on, it's oh, you should have taken the risk, it's for the risk takers. It's that's not a smart, that's a stupid fucking risk by any stretch of the imagination.
And
The whole point is people would take more risks and lead to better innovation if they realized that if they fell and if they tried and didn't succeed, they would have something to fall back on rather than dying.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is this will kill some people. For every success story, there's just so many horrible endings.
Well, and he even going back to what you're talking about, the welfare queens, where people were like, well, if we give everybody everything, then nobody's going to be sitting there, and there are going to be people who are just not going to work. He even talks about this. But everyone will want a fine house or a spacious flat. It is not the people's way to clamor for reason. We do not deny that there are plenty of egoistic instincts in isolated individuals. We're quite aware of that. But, in fact, we contend that the very way to revive and nourish those instincts would be to confine such questions as the housing of people to any board or committee. What he's basically trying to go on, but he's it's going in onto how, you're right, if we do give everybody what they need, sure, there might be one or two people that...
There's going to be that any system.
Yeah, no, even in our current system, arguably a lot of the billionaires or a lot of people that have basically been given everything they want, everything they needed from the get-go by their parents working hard, those are technically the welfare queens. Because...
Well, yeah, it's the idea, literally when I was talking to I have a lot of arguments about socialism with my father for whatever reason. But when I was talking about, welfare queens and stuff like that, I was like, corporate welfare is a thing, and he did not want to accept that. I think people in this country really don't know about, the idea of corporate welfare. Mostly. But when you talk about the bank bailouts, which is corporate welfare...
Literally, hey, you're failing, here's millions of dollars, have fun.
Yeah.
And they still don't want to admit that is either.
It depends on the person. Generally, more right-leaning people will just say Obama bad and then blame that all on Obama, rather than a systemic issue of just both parties being neoliberal pieces of shit and not doing anything. But
because it's not necessarily a bad thing for people to be idle every now and again, right? It's this capitalist idea that we have to be entirely productive every moment of our day. Like, it is okay to be like, well, I'm going to take a couple years to figure out what I want, because he even talks about when the masons and carpenters, all who were concerned in house building, know that the daily bread is secured to them, they were asked nothing better than to work at the old trades a few hours a day. People like to work. People don't like to be idle. They like to do something. Like, if you...
People get bored.
Yeah.
being productive, like literally going down to a chemical and like physical level, being productive gives you a lot of a dopamine response. So if you feel that you're being productive, like
I mean, there are other ways to get dopamine responses.
Oh yeah, but what I'm saying, yeah, what I'm saying is that the entire if capitalism was the way to go, then volunteer organizations just wouldn't exist. People doing things out of the goodness of their hearts would just not exist. But we don't see that. We see these organizations pop up time and time again, and generally what ends up happening in the capitalist spheres, people go, oh, they're virtue signaling, or they're trying to get some kind of social capital. And I think the Trash Future podcast had a good segment on this, where they were talking about the idea of the homo economicus, where every single person under like the current neoliberal hegemony is just someone who is constantly calculating, constantly looking, like swimming around like a shark because they can't stop, and constantly looking for jobs and opportunities, and they will travel wherever they want.
There's kind of a paradox in that, because capitalism is essentially the belief that people will do, just if you let them rule based on who has the most, they'll just do the right thing. But they also think people are just horrible monsters who will take advantage of people.
It's the Randian expression of capitalism, where it's the idea that, yeah, it's literally the egoist Randian explanation, where it's everyone is a hero, and if the lower classes are just grifters who are doing stuff, who are leeching off society, and the people at the top are there because they work the hardest.
But even Rand even basically said in Atlas Shrugged that if our society functions that way, there would be no art, there would be no beauty, there would be nothing beyond pure business, speculation, and grifting.
But Rand kind of likes that, though.
Yeah, like she makes
Rand is the very least honest about that, and I think that's what a lot of times that people like to.
She's not honest about it. She was a welfare queen herself. She literally lived off the state for years and died in poverty.
But she believed that she was this hero of capitalism. It's not about the actual reality of it. It's about how you perceive yourself. And
that doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that if you think that you are, imagine that. This is a weird cut, but do you guys know who the Flesh Eater courts are in Age of Sigmar and Warhammer?
No.
What?
All right, so the Flesh Eater courts.
Okay, this is gonna get cut. Why?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm the one editing it.
No cuts allowed.
No.
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna talk about my stupid Warhammer tangent. No. The idea is basically this. So they're a group of like cannibalistic people who are savages. They run around and just kind of eat people, but in their minds, in their heads, they are noble knights who believe they are doing the world a greater good. So the issue becomes whether or not, is it more important the reality of a situation or how you perceive that reality? Is it more important to, if you're so deluded that you live in that delusion, is it more important to then be like, well, actually, you're wrong, rather than trying to address the delusion and trying to really understand why people have gotten to that point?
So it's the Ben Shapiro of psychosis.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, if your house is going to flood, why don't you just sell your house? Who's going to buy it, Ben? Who?
Fucking Aquaman.
Exactly. It really is that idea of just it's a psychosis. It's not understanding what reality is, and being so up your own ass that you're just out of reality.
Well, but like that even comes back to here, because it's like what Kropotkin is basically stating, and even what he expounds upon in his previous book on mutual aid, is that yes, competition exists. Yes, competition can be a good thing, and even he takes that from Proudhon in saying that competition, when moderated and when not made the pinnacle of human society, is a good thing because it drives innovation. But he's arguing that, hey,
losing the competition shouldn't mean dying.
Well, not even that, but like he's arguing that as humans, as a human species, we are social creatures, and without society, without community, we do not and cannot survive. And he even has this thread throughout the entire book of Conquest of Bread, where it's like our current society was built on the backs of the gentle laborers from generations past. So we cannot necessarily have a specific claim to anything that we are currently making. Yes, we can say that we came up with the idea, but we cannot claim that it is ours and ours alone.
Really, his argument is that since the advent of writing, knowledge
Okay, but I'd like
passed...
to own my persona.
Oh my god!
No, you can't.
I'm gonna expropriate your persona.
So, since the advent of writing, you were saying?
Oh yeah, since the advent of writing, really, since now that before then, knowledge could not be really accurately transpired down through generations, but now that it can, you're essentially, whatever you do, no matter what you do now, it is always going to be built off the predications of what came before you. You're not gonna like literally invent the computer all the way back from the Stone Age and becoming a farmer. The reason why we have computers and things like that is because of the advancements of the past.
And I think that's why he calls himself a communist in the vein of Marx, is because he does kind of feel that history is this material dialectic, where everything that exists as it is today exists because of the push forward from the workers of the past, right? So, like, we cannot invent something that has no through line from the past. We cannot create something brand new because we're all just fish in a barrel interacting with each other.
There is no such thing. Everything is a remix.
Oh my god. Once you've read the dictionary...
Well, no, not even that to that extent, but to kind of take... Let's take something totally out of the wall, like modern EDM and modern dubstep music is actually a through line from Dadaist music, where it's taking this idea of, well, what is music? What can we claim that is music, and make something that is considered harmonious, that has phrases and has notes and has harmony with it. Like,
and let's not forget about electro swing.
Yeah, I think also
that just says it for itself.
Like going off of that, like a lot of these theories that we're talking about, and especially kind of the leftist tradition, it all builds upon itself, because one of the major things, I think I've discussed this in my other podcast, but one of the major things that people like Sargon of Akkad and a lot of reactionaries, and like, they like to think that something like postmodernism is a rejection of everything that came before it, and it's trying to lay down something completely different, and is saying, hey, let's tear down everything, when the reality is it is taking the good things from the thing before it and is adapting them and critiquing them in order to make it a stronger point. And that is really where it's coming from, because it's a flow of knowledge, and it's Hegelian in the sense where you're talking about you have a thesis, you have an antithesis, and then you get a synthesis, and that's really kind of how technology flows.
And even like the entire anarchist movement, at least the anarchist tradition, the Frankfurt School, and even up to Foucault in postmodernism, like, they all take something from the previous things and they expand upon it. And like, even if we're looking at, modern anarchist tradition, like modern anarchist theorists, like, they all take something from the previous anarchists. And this is actually an argument that I was getting with a friend of mine, They were like, well, anarchism is just like this radical position that is actually pretty mundane. It's like, well, yeah, it's mundane because we have a tradition. We have these theorists that have been writing about this for centuries. It's not just something that people are just like, oh, well, I just hate all of authority, and I don't want any kind of hierarchy ever. It's, well, we actually think
it's
that...
not a phase, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is actually something that I've been that's actually been coming up in my life a lot with what I call anarchists. The people that are just like, I listen to Rage Against the Machine once or twice, and I think everything fucking sucks. They have no tap into the tradition. They have no orthodoxy. Their entire praxis is just, I'm going to hate everything.
Well, actually, when I was in Europe,
I think it has a little more to do with not so much they just, but people who have been in positions where they found power over them to be abused and or absolute.
But they don't have a theory to back it up, and so therefore they can only take piecemeal measures.
Well,
That's what this podcast is about. We're trying to bring the theory and the actual thought behind anarchism as a solution to the working class so that they can better understand and, do better praxis. That's our whole point. I think one of the biggest things was I was saying when I went to Europe over the summer, and especially in Greece, and seeing some of the graffiti and stuff, there was actually a lot of anarchist graffiti, but looking into it, it was anarchist graffiti without theory. It was just the idea of, we're going to fuck shit up because we hate the state, but I mean, I think you can take that...
does still prove anarchism to be viable, because people generally know when they're being fucked with, and they kind of have an idea of where they want to be with a society.
Well, the
at
issue...
the very least, that's just the baseline.
The whole point is that they have that inclination of things are wrong, and so our goal is to say, we have the solution. We have something that you can take your qualms and your pros and turn that into actual policy that you can then use to actually change the system and make it better.
And I think the answer to the question of what now.
Yeah, and I think this is what Kropotkin was trying to go on to, was like, what do you do after the revolution? Where do you start? And this is what a lot of anarchists don't have. The ones that haven't read the theory yet, the ones that are either what my friend likes to call born-again anarchists, like born-again Christians, where you've never actually really looked into it. You're just like, well, this is a really good idea, let me try something. And we talk about how people perceive anarchy as not having a government. Even in the Conquest of Bread, he's talking about how there needs to be some level of management to allow people to have what they need.
Actually, even talking about that later is one of the other works I want to read on this podcast is Democratic Confederalism by Ocalan. And he talks about kind of the idea that anarchism is all about no government, and the less government you have, the more anarchistier it is. That's not true. There's a huge difference between government and state, and hierarchy, unjust hierarchy versus just hierarchy, There is always going to be some measure of hierarchy in a society. That's just because of how we have evolved.
Logistics have to happen.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but also, like, there is such a thing as just hierarchy. In our system currently, the unjust hierarchy is that we have politicians and senators and people who make decisions for us that oftentimes they don't know anything about what they're legislating.
You have an entire panel of men legislating on the women's reproductive rights.
Exactly.
That's just so weird.
In a perfect system, the idea is not only do you have representatives from the people who have their own interests, you also have representatives who, in the system, have power basically because they have worked their way up. Almost like in kind of a semi-meritocracy. What I'm talking about is like professionalism and professional professions, where it's like, ecologists would have some say on climate change and some say on, what to do about certain climate conditions. And they would work together with community representatives to find a goal that fit the community and helped the global scale. So it's like almost like a ground up form of you start with a community democracy and then you go up through the ranks and have even more democracy at the top, but also you have people and advisors who have dedicated their lives to studying things and really have dedicated themselves to trying to find a better understanding of just themselves and their lives.
It's almost like the good side of technocracy.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, of course, that idea is a little bit utopian, but again, like, you know, Kropotkin says, like, anarchism is ultimately utopian, and I think that if we strive for it, at the very least where we end up is something that we can, you know, something we can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. I actually have something I'm gonna link.
Yeah. Before we want to move on to chapter 7, our last chapter about clothing, I think we talked about it a little bit.
Were you about to say chapter the next one?
Yeah, chapter the next one.
Chapter the next one. Yeah.
Next time on The Chapter.
Yeah.
Oversell it?
Totally oversold it. But, so let's actually move on to this, the shortest chapter in this book, Clothing, which is all of what I would call 2 pages, but looks more like, but is actually more like 3.
Well, yeah, he literally just says, like, yeah, the last things in the last 2 chapters apply that to clothing. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and he even says, like, we talked about fashion earlier, like, he says, but it may be urged that this means gray uniformity at the end of everything beautiful in life and art. Certainly not, we reply, and still basing our reasonings on what already exists, we are going to show how anarchist society could satisfy the most artistic tastes of its citizens without allowing them to amass the fortunes of millionaires. And that goes straight into...
You're gonna have more art if your artists aren't starving.
Yeah, and that even goes into what he was talking about, the masons and the architects. They just want to devote their time to honing their craft and making what they want to make, instead of specifically trying to make profits for somebody else and maybe make a measly living out of it. Did I kill it?
I'm sorry.
I had to read a fucking meme.
my friends were outside, and I was like, they were getting a little loud, so I was like, okay. But
I had to water my cat.
But no, it is interesting. Just I think focusing on in the sense he's almost Marxist, like you said before, where he's focusing a lot on the material conditions of the revolution and what needs to be satisfied in order to keep it going. And it's really something that, again, you don't see a lot from... it's one of the major reasons why you need a theory like this, and that theory like this is very, very important. Because
it gives you the words to express, you know, exactly what your angst is about, and that's what this podcast
well, not even
is
that,
all about.
but you have a plan for the future, because without a plan for the future, your revolution is going to fail, because you need to be thinking 10 steps ahead of what you're actually trying to do in order to secure power, because other people have already thought about this, and they will take that power from you at the first chance they get. What you need to do is you need to think about exactly what you want to happen, and not only that, but what could possibly interfere with that, and afterwards, how do you deal with such
that from happening?
Well, not even stop that, but just how to deal with it.
Well, he almost kind of...
And that can be a rabbit hole thought, too, but...
Well, he almost kind of leads into what Simone Weil talks about later on, to kind of counteract Marx and Hegel, in saying that, you know, it's not the material efforts that made history, it's the force. It's the declaration of force. And in this case, he's specifically saying that the force that we need to countermand, that is being utilized against the proletariat and against humanity in general, is the force of being able to feed, clothe, and house the people that don't want to be in the system anymore. The people, the normal people that don't necessarily strive to be sociopathic millionaires that kill people with an axe while Huey Lewis in the News plays.
Yeah.
Except the fuck bees.
But actually just be like, I just want to have a life, you know, eat, sleep, and breathe, and, you know, do some cool shit every now and again. Which is literally, like if you talk to anybody and you break it down, that's literally what anybody wants to do. They just want to eat, sleep, breathe, and do cool shit every now and again.
Well, that's literally like the idea. That's literally what the capitalist class kind of forces on the working class, where it's like, oh, you want all this stuff. I think to quote Rise Against in their song, what was it called? But they were talking about kind of how is this a handout undeserved, or is it a just reparation? It's more about not, they just want handouts and whatnot and their welfare queens. It's more about people want to live. They don't want to die and be ground into dust. I believe it was it was their song Disparity by Design. So they're talking about they don't want people don't want to just be ground into dust. People don't want to be sent off to the Middle East and die fucking horribly in some godforsaken war so that the CEO of Boeing can make $2 more. People don't want that shit. They want to live. And that's all we're asking for. And that's all our system should value life above all else. And not in like the dumb conservative sense where it's like, yes, I care about I'm
the
pro-life.
fetus.
I care about the fetus, but the second, they have
The second it's born, you fuck yourself.
Exactly. Not in that sense, but actually giving a fuck about human life and not seeing people as only economic goods, but as people.
And there's actually a story that, kind of a little adage that's been going around the past couple of years about the story of the rich man and the fisherman. And the story basically goes that there's a fisherman, he's lounging, smoking a pipe, and he's got his fish for the day. A rich man comes by and basically goes, "Why aren't you fishing?" The fisherman goes, why would I need to fish? The rich man then goes, "Well, you need to fish so you can sell the fish so you can relax." And the fisherman looks at him and goes, "Well,
I'm relaxed.
I what do you think I'm doing right now? I have the food that I need for the day. I don't need to fish anymore. I mean, if I come across someone that needs to be provided for more, sure, I'll fish more. But why am I going to work harder than I need to reach the exact situation that I'm doing right now?"
As someone, I think that hits really the nail on the head, as someone who has had family in Appalachia and kind of has seen the decimation of, people's lives by, billionaires and economic incentives and whatnot. And the idea of like the hobo or the country bumpkin or the redneck, I think a lot of times a lot of liberals like to be like, oh, they're just Trump supporters, they're just racist, they don't know exactly what they're doing and they're just doing whatever. But you have to realize that through a different lens and through our lens and the lens that we should be using to view these people, they are, in a sense, even though they might be have reactionary social politics, the issue is not that. They very much work and toil for what they need, and then they relax the rest of the day. And this has been a long time tradition in like places like Appalachia, in West Virginia, and whatnot, of like, people doing a job but then like playing hooky the rest of the day because they got all the stuff they need, and then they're just kind of chilling out and doing whatever, and maybe they'll catch a train or whatnot. And that needs to be kind of seen and sort of celebrated, because really what they're doing is they're taking advantage of capitalists. And I think that this demonization of other peoples because of their racist beliefs in general tends to, rather than trying to say, hey, why do these people hold these beliefs? Who do they think the enemies are? And how can we fix that? One of the biggest things is that the reason why people of that region think that their enemies are like black people is because, they think of them as welfare queens. But if we were able to convince them that, no, it is not the black people that are your problem, it is not these Hispanic people that are coming to the country taking your jobs, it is the capitalists that have taken your jobs, it is them who have really done this. You will kill two
birds with one stone.
Two birds with one stone. And you'll be able to not only take these people, working class people, and really give them a sense of class consciousness, but you will also be able to say, look, your racism is ill-founded because these other people are your comrades. These people are the same people that you're fighting against. You need to realize that these are not your enemies, and you shouldn't vilify them as such. It is the capitalist that is your enemy.
What was that comic about nationalism where you have the rich man in the castle saying, "Look at all the wealth we have," and the serfs are like, "What wealth do we have? It's all yours." And then he draws a line in the sand, and then they're all of a sudden, "Oh, we're so rich! Oh my gosh!" Like, it's that same idea. It's this idea of a fake identity made through artificial borders. That
it's like. Mm-hmm. It's like the saying that everyone in America, the reason why we haven't had a revolution is just because everyone sees themselves as an embarrassed millionaire rather than an oppressed proletariat.
Well, and it's even more to the point. Like, why do we want to be a millionaire? And it's because we perceive millionaires as not.
We're brainwashed into thinking that that's the right way to go.
Well, not even that, but like it's like, hey, I want to be a millionaire so I don't have to work anymore. Like, the majority of people, when you say, if you had enough money, what would you do? And they would say, not work. Mm-hmm. It is only the sociopath that is like, I want billions and billions and billions of dollars, and I'm going to keep working for those billions and billions more.
It's like, what are you even doing with those? Are you eating them?
Like, it's literally just greed.
Well, let's even take for example our friend Rasa that we haven't talked about in forever.
3 episodes.
Oh my god.
He became a millionaire off of Bitcoin. And the first thing that he did was retire. He's not working anymore. He's literally just making money off of things that he's invested in. He's not working. And that is the American dream. That is the dream of these embarrassed millionaires, is not to be rich, but is to be able to be rich enough to not have to work.
I would say even not necessarily not have to work, but to really work, do what they love, and to pursue a passion where they don't have to work specifically just to put bread on the table.
Yes.
Exactly. And it kind of goes into your discussion last week of post-work theory, where it's like, it's not all about just to getting rid of, oh man, you just want nobody to work and then we'll just do nothing. It's more about taking these jobs that don't add anything to the economy, that are really pointless and stupid, just because people put them there, just because they want their fucking nephew to get rich. You want jobs that empower people, and we don't want middle management clogging up the bureaucracy. Yeah, exactly. The whole point is that people generally want to work because people need to work, but
people
the reason
get
why
restless.
also that, but people want to be billionaires not because they want shit tons of money in general, but because they want to not have to worry about, feeding their family, or if their grandma gets sick, they have to give her a new kidney.
And they also want to do what
for
they
someone
love.
with that basic instinct, he really does not seem to have any regard for other people.
Well, he's a sociopath.
Also have. Oh right, forgot about that.
Well, I wouldn't even call him a sociopath. I think he's more like Carton said earlier. He's brainwashed by the capitalist ideology, in that he thinks that
it's almost a religion.
Well, definitely. What is the thing from They Live? This is your god now, and it's a bunch of dollar bills.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry about that. Y'all can edit that out, right?
We don't have any cuts, but no.
All right, now it's going at the end of the episode, so.
But no, like the anarchist theory, the anarchist tradition, the post-work tradition, hell, even a lot of the main capitalist ideology is this nearing towards not having to work. Nearing towards being able to do what you love without having to worry about, what's going to happen if I lose? What's going to happen if I fail? Am I going to be able to...
Losing the competition should not kill you.
Exactly. Like, if you're running a race and you come in second, you shouldn't be shot on sight.
Precisely.
And that's really the poison that sort of these Randian economics have kind of injected into our system, where it's the idea that, well, you need to be on top in order to be moral, because everyone who's not on top is just a leech.
Well, not even Randian, but more of the whole Protestant work ethic. The idea that you have to be productive every day, or else you're failing at life. You have to make sure that you're making money, or you're making somebody else money, or else you're stealing from the company. I actually worked at a job under a boss that literally said, if you use the bathroom while you're on the clock, you were stealing money from the company. And I'm like, you're gonna basically tell us, no, we can't go to the bathroom because you're worried about $2.
But they're also stealing all of your labor.
Yeah, I gotta pee.
All right.
Well, we gotta wrap this up anyway. So.
Oh no, that was a pun on the thing. I don't actually have to pee.
Okay, but I think that to wrap this all up, I think we've got about an hour right now, and I think we got some really good insight into it.
You keep kind of cutting out there. I don't know if anybody else is here on that.
I am.
Yeah, just a little bit.
That might be my internet connection can kind of be bad. I'm not seeing the cuts on the Audacity thing is up right now.
Oh, okay, so we're good.
Yeah, I think you guys have final thoughts of these 3 chapters. I think these 3 chapters really play well into each other, especially just talking about what to do after a revolution and the practical solutions for the critics of anarchism. And I think that Kropotkin really does a good job. Like, these arguments that he's arguing against, 200 years later, are the same arguments.
Well,
you could literally just recite this book at someone in an internet argument if you went through the comment section for some reason.
Well, it's like the conservative. It's like the joke in the leftist circles that conservatives only really have one joke. They only have one joke. It's the same joke rehashed over and over and over again.
But it's packaged as something new.
Yep. Exactly. Well, I think that pretty much sums up, the next 3 chapters of the Conquest of Bread for food, housing, and clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really glad. They really got to the bread and cheese of it. I mean, meat and potatoes of it. No, I didn't. I meant bread.
Got him. All right, so if we all want to sign off, I have been Confight.
I am the Gecko.
I am Cardin.
And the one that's not talking.
No, you get up here. Get in these credits.
Zulacath, get up here.
And I'm Zulacath, and I said nothing.
All right, we're stopping it there.
Hey kid, wanna buy some capitalism?